ready. We're prepared. Do not give in to fear. We are fearless. This is not the time to be afraid. This is a time to stand up and fight back and to resist any temptation for them to divide us. We're in this together. The rule of law is on our side. We will not give in, not give up. We will not capitulate. We will not bow. We will not bend. We will survive.
I am very, very grateful to be in this space at this time. Very few people get to live long enough and have their fingers in all of these different pots to be able to then bring all of the knowledge that we've gathered and all of the experiences to the airwaves on a regular basis. It is an honor, and it is an honor to sit with really, really, really smart people. So I'm happy that you're here. So,
likewise, thank you.
Well, let me just say, people, you make your way, right? Sometimes people will reach out and ask you to do things, like I'm sure they asked you, how did this Newsweek cover come about? Let me not assume.
They asked me. It was, it's an honor. I want to shout out Jennifer Cunningham. She's the first woman of color editor-in-chief in the history of Newsweek. That's multiple decades. So shout out her. Shout out to Sherry Jennings, who was the point person who got me there. Shout out to Paul Rhodes, who's the head of magazines. He's based in the UK. Just an amazing team of people who saw this through. It's the cover story, it's the photo shoot, it's the video piece, it's all of it. And I mean, Karen, it's humbling because I'm not a full-time journalist like I used to be, in print, that is, at least in print. And, but I realize how much I miss it when I do things like this, and to see people talking about it is really is gratifying, because I wanted to do something. I know I wanted to do something like your show today. Thank you so much for having me, and this Newsweek piece to honor Malcolm, and it's working out beautifully. I'm thrilled that people are able to get something from what we created.
We're going to give you all of it today. Most of the 3 hours will be devoted to having conversations with people who either knew him or were impacted by him. Malcolm X, you and I did a podcast, which is available today on Karen Hunter is Awesome, where we talk about a lot of how Malcolm influenced your life, which I think is super important. But you say, they reached out to you. Vibe magazine, where you did so many cover stories. I think once you're a journalist, I often say on these airwaves that I'm not a journalist, but the tenets that put you in the space of asking questions, the curiosity, and then the ability to be able to disseminate information from people will never leave you once you've, and it is one of the most important jobs. Teachers, doctors, journalists, when we think about society and the pillars that hold us up, those three pillars are important, which is why scribes, writers, and scholars are one of the first people that got when fascism comes in.
Right.
They're going to burn books. They're going to kill the scholars. They're going to get rid of the teachers. They're going to get rid of the folk that are writing, the journalists. So I think it's an important thing that has died. So I'm glad that they came for you. I'm glad.
I'm glad as well. And the folks that's out there in Newsweek on the digital space, you can just go to Newsweek's website. It's on newsstands, so it's actually a collector's item because Spike is on the cover. And I mean, think about it. It's 100 years since Malcolm X was killed. 100 years since he was born, pardon me, 6 years this year since he was killed. And then we're talking about Spike Lee, and it looks like the universe is working. Spike and Denzel Washington and Jeffrey Wright and A$AP Rocky are literally premiering right now the Spike's fifth film with Denzel at Cannes Film Festival in France on Malcolm X's birthday, which wasn't lost on me and Spike as well when they picked the date. And he's like, wait a minute, it's May 19th. And so it's really significant in so many different ways. And then just what Malcolm represented in terms of, like you described us and others, truth-telling, digging for information, research, history, the things you all do with Nubia, the importance of reading and studying. That was Malcolm. And we especially need that in this age of incredible misinformation.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I'm always looking at dots connected. We unfortunately have been conditioned in this culture to raise up singular people like they're just dynamic unto themselves. But we can't talk about Malcolm without the movement of Marcus Garvey, which inspired his parents, right? Which inspired both of his parents to, in that household, had to be a lot of this Black Liberation Talk, right? His father was literally, all of his uncles were killed or brutalized by people angry that they wanted to be free, right? So to know what pushed him, what drove him, it's not just this man went to jail and read the dictionary, which or but it's that, right? And so I think we have to sit in the dots being put together and following them to a path of, like, you just don't wake up enlightened. A lot of things have to
No,
happen that you can lean on.
that's right. That's right. I mean, 1925, when Malcolm was born, Louise Little, native of Grenada in the West Indies, Earl Little, his father, native of Georgia, American South. Harlem Renaissance is happening. It's the jazz age, but there's also an incredible amount of Black people being hung from trees. It was just 4 years after the Tulsa, Oklahoma bombing that we talked about in your podcast just the other day. There's so many things happening in the country. And, Garvey, this Black man from Jamaica who came to the United States, people don't realize the Garvey movement was actually the biggest movement of Black folks in this country's history, even bigger in terms of its impact number-wise than the Civil Rights Movement. And here's a dark-skinned Black man and telling Black folks to love themselves in 1925, in spite of all the images that are out there that are negative and destructive toward us, and also saying that, Africa for Africans, and up you, mighty race, you will accomplish what you will. And so both Louise Little and Earl Little were disciples of that. And Earl Little was a traveling preacher who talked often about, this future world for Black folks. And ultimately, as they moved from place to place, Malcolm is born in Omaha, Nebraska, as we know. They lived in Michigan. He was eventually killed by white supremacists. They not only savagely beat him, but they actually laid his body across a railroad track to make sure he was killed. And the train literally split his body in half. And so this is the circumstances of Malcolm's life. His mother was then left with 7 children, including Malcolm, to raise by herself. And she literally broke down emotionally under the weight of the poverty. You could imagine the trauma of losing your husband. And then it was also the Great Depression. And we know what that did to
Wait,
this country. There's so many
wait, you
people. Slow
you have
down,
to
Kevin.
also, yeah, you also have to imagine a woman,
Yes.
a Black woman who couldn't vote. Black
Yeah.
women couldn't own property until the 70s without a male signature. So to care for, how do you make money, right?
Yeah.
She could be a domestic worker, of course, but we're talking pennies to feed
Yeah.
7 mouths. Your husband's gone, which makes you vulnerable to a whole lot of predation, not just, racial. Do you know what I'm saying? As a woman,
That's right. That's right.
I can't even imagine. Like, some people today are struggling to raise 1 or 2, 7 children, no husband, in a time when being a woman, I take for granted that I get up every day and do what I want. I take that for
Yeah.
granted. And I think
Yeah.
about, I'm not too far away from my mother making decisions based on her status in life. I
Mm.
don't know if she would have married. I don't know what she would have done had she had the freedoms that I have.
That's right. That's right. Louise Little also was rejected for the biggest of the insurance policies that were on her husband's life. And so they had to get government assistance. She was also a very fair-skinned Black woman who could have passed for white. Malcolm says in the autobiography she actually was white. She was half Black and half white, but she identified as Black. And a lot of times when she was working, she would get jobs, and some as the help, as we have learned to say in our cultural history in this country. And when it was found out that she had Black children, she would get fired immediately. And so all of that came after her. And she was an educated Black woman, who would challenge the government workers who would try to plant seeds of division amongst the children. Don't you want to go live somewhere else? And eventually, when they saw that she was slipping emotionally, she got institutionalized for over 2 decades, as we know. And Malcolm and his children, as I say in the Newsweek article, got distributed like sacks of food during the Great Depression. And it's just a tragic story, but it's also a heroic story because Malcolm did have those seeds planted, as you talked about, Karen, of the Garvey movement. So there's memories. He would go with his father to some of the speeches that he would do, and I think it was always there, that spirit. But unfortunately, the streets got him for several years, as we know. That's part of the story when he became Detroit Red, etc.
Even the streets, like, I think it's time for us to take a step back from all of the pathological ways in which we've been described, all of the ways
Mm,
on purpose, the streets, as if people have choices. I feel like we're heading into another era where people are going to make some decisions that may go against their moral being to feed themselves. and they'll be judged harshly for doing whatever they need to do to feed themselves, right? And I'm not making way for people to do crime, but I think it's a crime in a country so rich that people go to bed hungry and have no roof over their heads. I think that's a crime. That's a larger crime, a crime on
That's a
humanity.
bigger
But
crime.
we'll
Absolutely.
put that over there. 866-801-8255. We're talking with Kevin. I think all of us kind of want to have the same things, you know. I think that maybe people don't think about what they want, and they're just kind of waywardly ambling through life. But I think we all should want to have like some semblance of peace, some, some joy. I was sitting out. I went for a walk today, and then I sat and just listened to because it was very breezy and the birds chirping, and I was like, I get to sit in nature and experience this, and it is a blessing, you know, that I get to breathe good air, you know, drink clean
Mm,
water.
mm.
It's a blessing.
It's profound what you just said because I think about what Malcolm represented, which was he was a truth teller. He was fearless. He was courageous. He had the courage to hold up the mirror to America. And he was really, I mean, when you think about it, the civil rights movement was just, can we have the things that you were just describing? Can we have peace? Can we vote? Can we walk on any side of the street without getting hit upside the head or getting killed for who we are? And I think that's really all human beings and all Americans should want that basic safety. But this cancer of hate, this cancer of hate, I hate you because of your race, your gender identity, your ability or disability, your class, you know, we can go down a list of things, has really done a disservice to this country. When I think about us celebrating and honoring Malcolm at 100, you know, what were the lessons? Even the fact that he had the courage, the ability to go to Hajj, make that pilgrimage, and to rethink some of the things that he had been saying for several years over the course of time. Like, you know what, I'm changing my philosophy here. You know, I'll work with anyone who's willing to work with me, who
Mm.
is tapping into their inner human.
Think about that, making him an outcast. So one,
Yeah,
holding Elijah Muhammad accountable for the sexual dalliances that everybody knew about, right? So I kind of think about it today. You know, there are stories in it, and this is not about, you know, airing dirty laundry. This is not TMZ. But if you're a spiritual leader and you're taking advantage of the women around you, and I see it and I say nothing, then I'm complicit. My silence is acquiescence. That's what we've been taught on any spiritual realm, you know, especially if you're a follower of Islam or Christianity or whatever, it requires something of you, right? So because you respect and honor someone means that you love them enough to hold them accountable. Now, a true leader would say, thank you. Okay, you're right. I shouldn't be doing that. You're right. Instead, it turned into a verses that put Malcolm's life in the crosshairs, right? And even this notion of I saw white men with blue eyes and you know, when he was at Hodge, and we were all in the same boat. His shift on race was profoundly painful for some people who profit off of the division, because it's
yeah.
the only reason why you would not embrace that, right?
Malcolm was saying if we embraced a value system that saw your term, the inner human in all of us, and we actually practice our inner humanness, there was a possibility for a way forward. You know, for him it was Islam, but it could be something else. But it was just like if you could just find the inner human in you. And when we talk about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, I mean, listen, I used to be down with the Nation of Islam because when I read the autobiography of Malcolm X at age 18, it changed my life. And at that time, I didn't make a distinction between, well, here's Malcolm and here's this new version of it that is being led by Minister Louis Farrakhan, Honorable Louis Farrakhan. All I knew is that I wanted to be wherever Malcolm had been. I wanted to follow in his footsteps. I want to wear a watch like him. I'm going to always carry a pen like him. I'm always going to read like he did. I'm going to have 15 minutes of idle time. All the things that he talked about in the autobiography, I heard in his speeches because I just did a deep dive at age 18. And I honestly I can say this publicly loudly, Karen, I fell in love with Malcolm X. I still am in love with Malcolm X because I had never encountered anyone like that. And I believe, you know, what the FBI jokingly said about him was true, that he really believed what he was taught, like that we should have a righteous path. And unfortunately, if you still have the value system of the old ways, you'll do the things that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was accused of by those young ladies, girls, and some of the folks in some of the chatter that they had in the organization. And to this day, Karen, it hurts my heart that people still don't want to have those conversations about the behavior. And some people still don't want to have a conversation about the fact right in our home state of New Jersey, in Newark, New Jersey, some of the folks who are accused of shooting Malcolm, murdering Malcolm on behalf of larger forces. It wasn't just the Nation of Islam. Let's be clear about that. We're living there and hiding in plain sight. And people are saying things like, well, just let it go. It's in the past. You can't, not we can do about it now. Well, what we can do about it is ask ourselves, why are we participating? Why did we participate in the destruction of someone like Malcolm or any human being who was simply trying to do the right thing for his community and his people?
It's funny. Time has a way of revealing things. My, my father used to say, just keep living. Things will eventually reveal itself. Just keep
That's
living.
right. That's
And
right.
to your point, Martin Luther King died unpopular among Black people, like for real, and so did Malcolm. To the
That's
point
right.
that Newark, they not only were they weren't hiding in Newark. They weren't hiding. It was not. They were protected. There was no hiding. Everyone knew who did it, and there was no one's going. It's not even about snitching at that point. But it
No,
just speaks to
no.
that. And now we fast forward. 60 years later, since he was assassinated, he would have been 100 today. You think about how the narrative has shifted on both of these fronts. Martin, we have a holiday celebrating Martin Luther King Jr., and Malcolm X is in many ways a social lightning rod for all culture, art, music. You think about when all of these clips that I hear. Like, Smith, play the one I sent over. This one.
Who taught you, please? Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate, you should ask yourself who taught you to hate being what God gave you.
All right, we can end there. Yes, that speech goes on, of course, but that everyone knows that, right? It's not the
Yeah.
first time anyone's heard that, but it's so poignant today. Today as people are battling Robert, what's his name, Griffin the third, making these comments about Angel Reese hating Caitlin Clark, and people are now looking at him as he sits to try to explain it with his wife on the couch behind him. It's such a weird image. The Patrick Mahomes is like, look at my haircut. Why did you let me walk around with my hair looking like that? A few weeks ago, I didn't even play it because I was like, how sad that you are even having this commentary about your beautiful hair.
Yeah.
Ah, who
I
taught you
mean,
that?
Malcolm is relevant in 2025 and beyond because what he was talking about 60 years ago is still relevant. The profound self-hatred that's born of racism in our communities, and where we're taught to hate our hair, we're taught to hate our lips, our skin color, no matter how light or dark, our body types, when we know everyone is beautiful and handsome, no matter what you look like. And this is what Malcolm's trying to instill in us. What I got from him was also this importance of knowing your history, that your history has to be the foundation. My favorite quote of Malcolm: history is a people's memory. History is a people's memory. Without it, we are demoted to the lower animals. And that's when you see all the crazy behavior, the responses to Cassie as she was testifying last week, trashing Black women in all kinds of ways, not just her. I mean, it's profound self-hatred because many of us are confused or don't know who we are. Just like a lot of the folks who support Donald Trump, the MAGA folks are confused, don't know who they are. And so anything goes. And this is what Malcolm was pointing out to us, which is you've got to know yourself first and foremost, and you have to go from self-hatred to self-love. And when I finished the autobiography of Malcolm X, Karen, I felt like that was the beginning of my journey at age 18. Okay, I've practiced self-hatred really, really well. Now, what do I got to do to figure out this self-love thing? Considering the first 18 years of my life was profound self-hatred, this is going to take some serious excavation of everything that I've been taught.
Mm. Where did you start? Not love to hear the first time people have heard the name Malcolm X. Where were you?
Huh.
Did you read the autobiography of Malcolm X? Have you never read the autobiography of Malcolm X? Did you hear about him as an adult? Did you hear about him as a child? And what was he to you? Like for me, it was, as I mentioned, I grew up in a household where Marcus Garvey and like Asada Shakur, the books. So I'm deeply rooted in Eyes on the
Yeah.
Prize and our history and culture. But still, Spike Lee's movie, I remember sitting in the theater going, wow, and he did a he did a job. Denzel did a job. And maybe for a lot of people, that was the first time they saw Malcolm X with Spike
Yeah.
Lee, which is
Yeah.
why I think having him on the cover, because it was a generation. It was a different
That's right.
generation, and here comes Spike Lee with this film that Denzel embodied Malcolm X in, and it was chapter and verse. I mean, they went through it.
And as I say in the article, well, I quote Spike in the article, he says that 6-year-old Ryan Coogler sat on his father's lap watching Malcolm X, and it had an impact on him. And thinking about what Ryan Coogler has become is we don't get a Black Panther, we don't get a Sinners if Spike didn't create movies like Malcolm X, and if Malcolm X himself did not exist. That's what we're talking about when we talk about tradition and passing things along and impacting people. And yes, I would love as a writer for people to read as many books as possible, but sometimes it might be a song, it might be your podcast or radio show, it might be a movie, it might be a TV show. As long as it's something, that can grab the attention from, even with Malcolm X, the centennial, Spike is on the cover, not Malcolm X, because I realize more people will pay attention. Like, why is Spike Lee on the cover? Oh, he's a famous filmmaker. He's a super fan of New York Knicks. But then they read the article, they're like, wow, this is a history lesson about Malcolm X. That's the point. Get you to
Mm.
get you to read, to get you to read the article.
And it was Spike's mother that introduced him to the autobiography of Malcolm X. It's
That's right.
we're in some times. Nothing is singular. Even these times that
No,
we're in are going to define the next generation. It's going to define a lot of you. Some of you are going to find out what you're actually made of. I am grateful to be alive today. Always knew that I would be. This is a time we're in.
that's right.
This weekend we'll commemorate the killing of George Floyd, which was another
That's
lightning
right.
point in
That's
this
right.
country's history. And here we are today,
Yeah. And let me say this really quickly, Karen. There are many great things that the Nation of Islam did. It saved people's lives. We want to be very clear about that. It had one of the most successful drug rehab programs that ever existed in this country. It saved Malcolm's life. And so I think for Black people, it's not an either or. Any people, it shouldn't be an either
That's right.
or. Two things can exist at the same time. This is the things that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Nation of Islam did that was tremendously important. But then here's some things with the Black church or Black Muslims or Black Jews or Black anything that we need to pay attention to. Are our values consistent with who we say we are that's coming out of our mouths? Is our behavior consistent? Are we doing one thing in public and doing something else behind closed doors?
Mm. 866-801-8255. We're going to take calls. Also, when we think about Spike having to raise money, you think about that, right? And I love that you said this, because anytime I talk about people, I'm never talking about casting them away. It's
Mm,
it's accountability in these times, and it's really not even about that person. It's about the behavior, right? So Spike was able to go to Oprah and to a bunch of people who gave. Bill Cosby gave money so that this film could be made at the level that it was made, so that Ryan Coogler could get $90 million from a studio to produce something like Sinners, right? So that
that's
money
right.
wasn't readily available for people back then. Spike
That's right.
literally had to go raise money to get this made, and people open their wallets to get it made. So you're right. This ain't the time to cast anybody, but we got to hold these principles up against the light and make sure that they
Well,
are.
We're ready. We're prepared. Do not give in to fear. We are fearless. This is not the time to be afraid. This is a time to stand up and fight back and to resist any temptation for them to divide us. We're in this together. The rule of law is on our side. We will not give in, not give up. We will not capitulate. We will not bow. We will not bend. We will